And well, our big NDTV exclusive after the IndiGo horror, where there was a 10 to 12 hour delay and a passenger lost cool and assaulted the pilot, there was horror on yet another flight, and this time it was Air India. This is an NDTV exclusive because a passenger actually reached out to NDTV and narrated the ordeal. There was chaos in the Air India Delhi-Mumbai flight, and in fact the 9 a.m. AI flight was actually delayed for almost 17 hours. The passenger narrates a harrowing experience. It was delayed by 17 hours. They were meant to take off at about 9 a.m. but they finally took off at 2:15 a.m. past midnight. So you can imagine the ordeal of the passengers who were stuck inside the aircraft for 17 hours. They were made to sit inside the plane for over 6 hours. And well, NDTV has also reached out to Air India for a response, but there's been no response from Air India so far. The primary reason, of course, that's being cited by airlines for these massive delays is the weather condition, dense fog engulfing the national capital region entirely. And well, exclusively on NDTV, we're being joined by Rifka Verma, the Air India passenger who reached out to us narrating her ordeal. Rifka, thanks very much for joining us and for reaching out to us with your story. Talk to us about what happened. I mean, a 17-hour delay. This is even more than the IndiGo flight that's now going viral because of all the wrong reasons, because of the passenger assaulting a pilot there. But a 17-hour delay is massive. What exactly happened with you guys?
Yeah, hi, good evening. So, the flight was originally meant to take off at 9 a.m. and there was no information given to us until we checked in around 7:30 a.m. or even 8 a.m. that the flight would be delayed, and it was fairly obvious looking at the weather conditions that there would be a delay. So I asked multiple times whether the flight was on time, and I was told that it is, and then, we reached the boarding gate. And we were told that it's delayed to 11 a.m. And that there could be a further delay. Now, they cited fog definitely as one of the reasons, but, it really snowballed through the day into the fact that, they said that the aircraft hasn't arrived. Once the aircraft arrived, they said we don't have crew for the aircraft. And this was around 2 p.m. where they said that now, the crew that was supposed to be on this flight has been put on another flight. So it was absolute chaos, and of course after the crew arrived around 5:36 p.m., we were made to board the flight with the hope that, the flight will take off at 6:30 p.m. This is what we were told. And then once we boarded the aircraft around 8 p.m., there was no pilot. So, I don't think that the ground staff is to blame. I don't even think the crew is to blame as much as it is top management and, just the lack of empowerment of, the front lines who don't receive information. There is mismanagement. People were not fed food. When we got onto the flight, we were given cold puffs. We were given a package with some, chips and juice. There were no hot meals or hot trays. There were elderly passengers who had been waiting for 17 hours. So it is absolute lack of management. It is just not valuing, your passengers or your customers, keeping them informed.
Absolutely.
And it's truly tragic. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you made an important point there, Rifka, saying that ultimately the ground staff is not to blame because they're also bound. They can't do much in such a situation, but ultimately it's the airlines that has to take responsibility because you were inside that flight for almost 6 hours. What was that like? Because the flight on the tarmac, it can be suffocating, and as you said, there are elderly people on the flight. There were children, I'm sure, extremely restless. Did you try to reach out to the crew? Was there at least some sort of attempt made to, in a sense, pacify the passengers inside the flight? Because as the aviation minister has also said that passenger discomfort is something that has to be looked at more carefully, given the fact that these are extremely expensive flight tickets that passengers buy and then they have to go through this.
Yeah. So I think the primary thing over here is that I think they knew that, they don't have a captain, they don't have a pilot, and yet we were, made to board the flight. At this point, after, so many hours of delay, if you don't have a captain, I would have expected that they at least cancelled the flight and they gave us a definitive answer, but we were made to board the flight. because I feel that Air India didn't want to take responsibility of either reimbursing passengers or putting them up in a hotel and incurring that cost. We got onto the flight, no apology was made, that I'm so sorry that you suffered like this. One of the crew members even said, I don't know, because I've just landed from Bangalore and I've been put on this flight spare. But, your training still asks that the first thing you do is apologize. We were waiting to hear something from somebody, and there were, in fact, 4 Air India pilots who were flying in the business class cabin with us as passengers. And, they didn't have much information either. So people are scrambling for information. And by this point, people are fighting with each other because they're tired, they're frustrated. It just became very chaotic. And then, in the name of food, they were giving us this cold food. So not much, really was done to comfort the passengers. The air conditioning was not, working on, fully. And at this point, they could have just deplaned us, but they didn't do that. So it was very badly handled.
So as you said, communication is key as well. When you have passengers stuck inside a flight for almost 6-7 hours, you expect the crew to communicate to you and at least tell the passengers as to what the plan of action is. So what do you expect of airlines in such a situation where it's in nobody's control? I mean, the pilot can't do much, the crew can't do much. What do you expect of airlines in such a situation, passengers like yourself?
Yeah, I expect better flow of information. From I think it's about the management. You're right. It's not on the crew. It's not on the pilot. But they should have contingency plans. They should have better crisis management. If you don't have an answer as to when the flight is going to take off, put us up in the Air India lounge. Feed us food, comfort us, and let us know that look. We may not be able to take off today until so-and-so time. It seems, unlikely. So, those who want to deplane, please deplane and we will put you on another flight. We'll put you on a Vistara flight. I mean, these are both Tata Airlines. And it seems that, even after Tata has taken over, Tata as a company has great values, conscience, but it doesn't seem to be percolating, to the Air India, ideology, the way, things are handled or managed. So, we expect to be, at least be told, at least be kept in the loop of what's going on and given options. We were not given options because we were told that if you want to offload, it's going to take 2.5 hours to offload you. And because of that, people didn't want to offload because they were hoping that at least in 2.5 hours, the flight would take off, So at least communicate with us, keep us informed and have a crisis plan, a backup plan. I think they were afraid to spend the money.
So having a contingency plan in such a situation, because this is perhaps something that airlines should have anticipated, given the fact that there has been dense fog, particularly in the past couple of days, and there are IMD predictions sort of forecasting dense fog in the area. But do you think airlines have to be held accountable? Because of course, Air India has not responded to this so far. We have reached out to Air India, I must reiterate, but until and unless there's some video that goes online, that goes viral, do you think airlines aren't that accountable when it comes to such situations? And the DGCA or perhaps the aviation regulator has to, in a sense, hold them accountable?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's the top management that's accountable because, like I said, the ground staff clearly doesn't have the training that is required, to handle such a situation. So it actually has to be top down. And there needs to be a larger sense of responsibility taken by the management to say that we need to improve our operations and management.
That's right. And as you said, the uncertainty that you guys were caught in, that's absolutely unfortunate there. But talk to us about how you coped with that pressure of being stuck inside the flight for 6 hours? As you said, there were elderly people, there were senior citizens, there were children there as well. How did you or people around you cope with that kind of traumatic experience of being stuck inside of a flight for 6 hours? And of course, the fact that I'm sure many people on that flight had their own sort of emergencies as well, and that flight was delayed by 17 hours. So there has to be some sort of end to it as well.
I mean, I think at the end of it, people were hanging on to the hope because some people really needed to get to Mumbai, So a lot of people were just hanging on to the hope that, the flight will take off at some point. And I think in this situation, somehow, maybe trauma bonds you. So everyone was supportive of each other. People were feeding each other, giving each other water. And I think a lot of people were tweeting at that point, and just that collective sort of action sort of kept, everyone together in a sense.
This is not just a Delhi story or a Mumbai story. Flight delays across the country. Rifka, thanks very much for joining us. But do stay on with us because we are joined by callers from across the country. Stephen from Mumbai is also with us. So, Stephen, talk to us about your story. These flight delays really causing a lot of, ordeal, a lot of trauma for passengers across the country.
The reason is not the flight per se. It is poor communication. Every time there is a flight delay, they always say technical reason. They're not very specific, And you can shut down your airports for a day or two, keep people at home safe, keep the staff safe. Why fly at all? What's the ordeal? You are delayed by a day or two. Unless there is an absolute emergency. The airlines must communicate, the transport authorities must communicate, ground services must communicate. You don't bus people on tarmacs and leave them for hours, That's my point. Thank you.
Right. Stephen, stay on with us. You made an important point saying that vague reasons being cited by airlines is not justified. At a time when, passengers are paying such high prices for flight tickets, they at least deserve to know what went wrong. But talk to us specifically if you had, such an experience on a particular flight. Talk to us about any specific incident you might want to share.
Well, it has happened. Sometimes we are being kept on the ground, and sometimes even international flights, they have been delayed, but soon they redress the situation and get you back on the tarmac and back into the terminal. You can't keep young children, infants, confined to a plane for over several hours. And I don't understand why that IndiGo pilot had to come out from his confines of his cockpit where he could have stayed secure and made an announcement. What are he trying to play drama to the already disgruntled flyers? Something is seriously wrong. It is a nexus of all three agencies, on the ground, above ground, and the authorities,
Absolutely. That's a very important point there, Stephen. So all you're saying is that don't put on this facade, be honest with the passengers and communicate effectively. That is critical. I think that is one point that's really sort of that's coming out from all these stories. But let's go across to our reporters as well. Pratibha is joining us live from Bengaluru. So Pratibha, I'm being told you have passengers with you as well who have their own stories to tell. Over to you.
True. In fact, when it comes to Bengaluru, yesterday was a pretty bad day with respect to flights from to and from Delhi. Most of them that were diverted as well as delayed. But then today the weather has been fairly okay as far as Bengaluru is concerned and flights have taken off. But of course, When it comes to the other destinations like Chennai, Varanasi as well as Hubli, flights have been delayed. Over 20 is what we are told as far as today is concerned. And with respect to the diversions, most flights from Bengaluru to Chennai, or those flights that have to land to Chennai, were diverted to Bengaluru, and that is 6 in total. I have with me a passenger who was to book a flight to Delhi but then has had to cancel it in the last minute, considering the news reports that emerged yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. I came to Bangalore to celebrate Sankranti with my family on a schedule to go back this week, but all the flight cancellations is throwing a wrench into my plan. I'm now evaluating my options on flying out next. Need to wait to see when the flights will take off appropriately.
In fact, Chennai is one of the most preferred destinations, especially from Bengaluru to Chennai. Several flights or several passengers who keep flying in and out. And one such passenger to Chennai, all your plans disrupted?
Yes, brutally disrupted. I was planning to fly to Chennai for my US visa application, but because of the fogginess and the bad weather and the news, I had to cancel it at the last minute. So I'm just waiting for when I can go the next time.
When it comes to flight delays and diversions, this is not the first time. And how do you rate this kind of experience that you've had?
Out of 10.
Out of 10?
Out of 10, I would probably rate this a 9 in terms of adversity.
Right. And what about you? When it comes to flight diversions, this is not the first time.
Definitely not. Bangalore and foggy weather is something we're used to, but it would have been handled better because we know the inclement weather is going to be this way. So diverting flights or cancelling flights last minute is what bothers the passengers. If you're given a little more intimation, then we would have planned better. Our schedules could have been better. So in that perspective, it's terrible, but it is what it is. We need to learn to deal with it.
Well, in fact, I have a personal experience too. When I had to fly back to Bengaluru from Kochi, I had to stay overnight at the flight terminal, and this is one of the bitter experiences that has always been unforgettable for me. And tomorrow I'm again flying off to Kochi, and I dread the experience already.
Pratibha, thanks for sharing that with us. Extremely unfortunate there. And for journalists particularly who have to fly to various places constantly. But of course, one point that's coming out very prominently is that accountability needs to be fixed. And where does the buck really stop? I mean, you have all these travel agents, and then of course the airline, and then finally the aviation watchdog. Who is actually to be held responsible for this? Somebody has to take responsibility. Archana from Gurugram is also joining us live on the phone line. Archana, over to you. You have any specific story to share with us?
Hi, I'm Archana here.
Go ahead.
Can you just make the music a little stop? I can't speak.
Okay, we'll try and fix that, but can you hear me loud and clear now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah. See, I've been an ex-airline staff 20 years ago. I worked for 6 years with Jet Airways. But the thing is that, see, it's like, बोलते ना, ताली दो हाथ से बजती है. It is the fault of the airline as well as the passenger. When you know you cannot travel at this time, why do people travel around this time when you know there's so much of fog? So try to change your plans or try to take later flights. But I agree, the airline is also at the fault. They should have been also informed. So it goes hand in hand, and by assaulting somebody like this, I think it's very wrong. Even they are doing a service to you all. Even they are leaving their families. So I think we should take that all in consideration.
It's an important point that you're making there as a passenger yourself, Archana, that one must maintain calm in such a situation, because it's in nobody's control. As I said, it's beyond anybody's control, given the fact that there's dense fog and the weather is unpredictable. What does one really do? And the ground staff is really not to be held accountable, because they're also bound, and ultimately it has to come from the top management of the airlines. Prasad is also joining us live on the phone line from Chennai. Prasad, go ahead and share your experience with us. These flight delays really hurting passengers across the country.
I traveled from Mumbai to Chennai yesterday morning. The flight was supposed to take off from Mumbai at 6:40. It was a Vistara flight. We were made to board the flight at around 6 a.m., but then we were made to sit in the cabin for almost 3 hours before the flight eventually took off at around 9. I'm sure the airline knew that there would be delays due to fog and whatever, which is reasons which are beyond their capabilities. But then why were passengers made to board and wait in the aircraft for 3 hours before the flight took off?
Absolutely, that's an important point you're making there, and this was a Mumbai-Chennai flight. So of course we now have a Delhi-Mumbai flight, several other flights that we've discussed, and this is the Mumbai-Chennai flight that Prasad is talking about. So you would rather prefer as a passenger to stay at the airport where you have certain facilities, it's not suffocating like it is to sit inside an aircraft, rather than actually having been made to board the aircraft when it is clear to the airlines that there are expected delays. So would you as a passenger prefer for boarding not to start till there is clarity on when the flight will take off?
That is exactly what I want to say. I mean, at least in the airport, we are free to, move around, get something to eat, or get a coffee, or get something to drink. But then you are at the mercy of the crew once you board the flight, and it is uncomfortable sitting in one place for 3 hours without having, to move or getting to move. So I don't know why the airlines want people to board and then wait in the aircraft rather than announce before. We can tell them that there is fog and the flight is going to get delayed, so we can at least be in the terminal waiting and we can board the flight when it's ready to depart.
Okay, so that's again an important point that you're making, that don't make us board the flight till there is clarity. But talk to us about your own experience. I mean, being stuck inside a flight for 3 hours, I'm sure there were senior citizens, there were children inside the flight as well. Must have been quite difficult for them as well.
Oh yes, I mean, there was a small baby who was consistently crying all along, and it was tough for the others as well, having to listen to that. And then there was no information forthcoming. It was only after a lot of, maybe an hour and a half after sitting on the aircraft, that we were told that because of fog in Chennai, the flight is delayed and they weren't sure when it would take off. So it would be better if passengers were made to wait at the terminal rather than the aircraft itself.
All right, Prasad, thanks very much for joining us with your story. I'm also being joined by a pilot with an Indian carrier from Delhi. Thanks very much for joining us on NDTV. What is your take on this entire situation? Of course, that video going viral of a passenger assaulting a pilot while he's announcing the delay has shocked people beyond belief. I mean, some people are confused about this entire situation because passengers, of course, are outraged, and that rage is perhaps understandable, but violence is not justified. What is your take on this?
First of all, on behalf of not just the pilot community, but the entire aviation community, we understand the plight of the passengers. We understand that everybody is having problems with these delays, but what we need to also understand that this is completely out of the control of the company, the pilots and the crew and the ground staff. So the weather is a phenomena that nobody has any control over. There is not a fixed time in the year when the fog would hit. This year, yesterday, we had fog hitting Chennai. Nobody could have predicted that. And why the passengers are inconvenienced by unsure answers by the airlines or the staff is because the weather is a dynamic phenomena. It changes not just every half an hour, it changes every 15 to 20 minutes. So the purpose and the want of the airline and the crew as well is to ensure that we can depart, and even if there is a delay of an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, we can take the passenger to their destinations. But it is not that something we can predict. Sometimes the weather would get better in half an hour, sometimes the weather would get better after 10 hours. And the FDTL, which nobody is mentioning here on your program today, unfortunately, is something that we have to deal with. You have to understand, we are not machines. As pilots and as crew, we can only function for 8 to 10 hours properly and give response to the workload that we have. After that time, we cannot work properly. So that is when the FDTL limit crosses, we change the pilots or the crew or both of them to ensure the safety of not just us but also the passengers. And if you have been around Delhi, everybody in Delhi must be knowing that the fog in Delhi since yesterday has been so bad that you couldn't even see the roads if you're driving. So how can you expect the pilot to fly an aircraft?
Absolutely. That's a very important perspective that you bring to the table, because you say that ultimately you also have night shifts and long working hours, and it takes a toll on your mental health as well. But sir, what will be your response to those passengers who say that there has to be some accountability, A, and B, that there has to be honest communication? A lot of passengers are of the view that many a time, whether it's the crew or the ground staff, they put up this facade and sort of that those delay announcements sort of just continue. What would be your response to having effective communication in such a situation with passengers?
The problem over here is that even we don't have other answers. We are continuously in touch with the ATC, the ground teams, the meteorological department to ensure that we have, what if we have any picture of the weather. But if you monitor any ATC, Delhi, like Jaipur today morning was better, but Delhi and the certain areas that get affected by fog in these weather, like Amritsar today, was horribly bad. The ATC was telling the pilots not to depart out of Delhi, but the pilot on that particular flight was adamant that he wants to operate because he knew the weather is good enough to continue the flight. He didn't want to inconvenience the passengers. You also understand when we leave home, our job is to take you from A to B, B to C, and whatever flights we're doing that day. Right. And we also want to do that and come back home. We also like to do that. It's not our intention to go.
So as you said, sir, that ultimately pilots are also human beings, and you have a tough job of communicating what's being told to you by the ATC or by the airline. But very quickly, before I let you go, what will be your message to all the passengers out there who might be outraged with these constant delays, with having to board a flight without any certainty? What would your message be to them?
First of all, I would like to apologize. I understand their, their troubles and the uncertainty that they face. I apologize on that behalf from the airline staff and from the side of the crew. But at the same time, the passengers need to understand as well. They can see outside the aircraft it's foggy condition or it's bad weather. How could they expect a pilot to have all the answers, or the ground staff to have all the answers? So sometimes you have to, be patient. And it's very easy to say that, okay, we want to deboard the aircraft, but the entire deboarding procedure takes about 2 to 3 hours. And the airline wants to delay that procedure. They don't want the passengers to be inconvenienced because they have to go back to the terminal, go through another security check, stand in those queues, be issued new boarding passes, have their baggages and everything screened again. So yes, the airline doesn't want that as well.
Okay.
So the target is to ensure that, passenger inconvenience is to the least.
Right. Thanks very much, sir, for joining us. I know it's not easy for a pilot to really speak out. But of course, while the pilots continue to say that, well, what can they do? But ultimately, it's the airlines that also have to be held responsible. We'll take a last caller. Radhakrishnan is joining us now from Chennai, I believe. From Mumbai, I'm being told, sorry. Radhakrishnan, go ahead and tell us your story and also respond to what the pilot just told us. I mean, he said that what can ground staff do? They also, they have no control over the situation. They don't have much information. So ultimately, passengers will also have to be patient.
Good evening. In the first place, I would support the pilot and by saying that it is the passengers have to constantly, especially during this season, the passengers should be checking out if there is any flight delay. It is the passenger's responsibility to check. 2 weeks back, my nephew had to travel from Bombay to Bangalore with his family. The flight did get delayed. It was a evening flight, SpiceJet flight. SpiceJet did send us messages, and my nephew also was constantly checking.
Right.
We didn't move out of our residence in Vashi, Navi Mumbai, which is almost 2.5 hours distance from the airport. But we didn't move out of our residence till we were almost sure that the flight will take off. So the flight ultimately took off around 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the early morning next day. But we were all comfortable. It is for the passenger who is to travel to keep checking. The pilots, the ground staff are humans after all.
Okay.
And there is no way that somebody can punch a pilot or assault a ground staff.
Yes.
That is not done. That is not civil behavior.
Absolutely. Violence cannot be justified at all. Radhakrishnan, very balanced perspective there. Thanks very much for joining us on NDTV. So, well, passengers say that ultimately somebody has to be held responsible, while pilots say that passengers have to be, patient as well. They have to constantly monitor. This is an unprecedented situation. I mean, delays caused by fog and unpredictable weather. Nobody can really do anything. But at some point, airlines have to take responsibility for this. And well, the DGCA has come up with a plan and SOPs will be issued shortly.